Introducing API-led connectivity with Anypoint Platform. Anypoint Platform is a unified, highly productive hybrid integration platform that will create seamless application network of apps, data, and devices with API-led connectivity as its means. On a technical level, it's a collection of runtimes, frameworks, and tools along with web applications. The tools and frameworks are there for us to build out the applications themselves. We have a solid runtime called Mule for running applications and applying policies. This runtime can run on-premise or in the cloud. And we have a web application responsible for deploying, running, managing, and monitoring these applications we deploy to Mule, defining, managing, and discovering APIs. The API development lifecycle and API definition. So we talked a lot about this need to design. In the design phase, one of the tools that we have available to us in the Anypoint platform is API Designer, allowing us to use a web-based IDE to build out RAML files. As we're building out those files and defining our API and designing it, we'll also have the ability to simulate that API through things like the mocking service providing responses back based on our examples, and the API console, giving us a view of all of the resources and methods we've generated from our RAML. We then can also bring feedback in. So feedback can be gotten in a couple ways, one of which is our API portal, which developers can go to, discover the API, learn about it, and provide us feedback. Also the Exchange, another great way for MuleSoft-oriented developers to discover APIs. They can go in here and search within your organization, find what APIs and RAMLs are out there, and then provide you feedback after they've gotten the opportunity to use them. And then finally, a validation piece. Along with gathering all that feedback and validating it against your initial design, there's also some tools like API Notebook that will let you mock out use cases to show validation of your API against a specific process. And then, again, out of all of that process becomes your finalized API spec, at least finalized for that first version, that you will use to define your API. Now, taking it a step out, what about the API implementation? How does that fit into these different tools in the platform? Well, from an implementation standpoint, you have the ability to use an integrated development environment called Anypoint Studio to build out simple to very complex APIs and integration apps. On top of that, there's a unit testing framework called MUnit that will let you write test cases against your Mule application, both on the unit and integration standpoint, and potentially also the functional standpoint as well. This then will provide you with a service and API once you've built all of this out. And then lastly, once you do get the service and API built out, where do you go from here? Well, first off, you have the ability to version your API. And inside of the platform, there's a whole area called API Manager with powerful features around versioning and management. API Manager also handles the secure layer. It's going to allow you to apply policies and do different security against an API you have deployed. Finally, deploy and register. Well, if you've got the API made, it wouldn't do much good if it wasn't out there and accessible. So deploying it to the runtime through the Runtime Manager will let you deploy that application onto an on-prem or cloud-based Mule runtime. The Runtime Manager will also give you monitoring capabilities so you can better understand if the application is up, what's going on from a logs perspective, and so on. And in the platform, there's also an API analytics platform. So when you get to that analyze phase where you need to see when users were rejected for policy violations, what area of the world your API requests are coming into, and just get custom charts and data, API analytics is going to provide you that. Also, troubleshooting ability, which really kind of phases in all of these pieces. Your troubleshooting can be driven from the analytics, the Runtime Manager, the API Manager. The scalability, the Runtime Manager allowing you to scale out the amount of workers in a cloud-based deployment. And then finally, responding. So once you get all this information back, determining what you can change and iterate on and creating that next version of your API when the future release should come out. Now, all in all, you've seen a bunch of different pieces, and this graphic here embodies all the different components, many of which we're going to work with. In the top left corner, you can see the Anypoint Design Center. This is focused on your ability to really build out and create these different items that we've been talking about. Studio, where we'll spend most of our time in the subsequent weeks to build out the applications. The Designer, to allow us to write interfaces for our APIs, and Connector Dev Kit, which lets us write connectors to external systems that people can use inside of our applications. In the top right, the Anypoint Management Center, which gives us a runtime manager, an API manager, and an analytics platform for everything from deployment to the management of our apps. The Anypoint Exchange in the middle, which will allow us to discover available connectors and templates and all different kinds of MuleSoft-oriented applications. The Mule Runtime Engine, the actual server itself. The Anypoint Connectors, which allow us to connect to various systems like Salesforce and so on. Runtime Services, allowing us to have some different services that we can use inside of the Runtime Manager. And Hybrid Cloud, the ability to go in and have essentially a cloud-based deployment that can also talk to an internal network and have the ability to have these hybrid models with both on-prem and cloud-based servers running. So this is really, with the platform as the means, going to allow you to uniquely enable an application network. With all of these tools and things that we're going to dive into throughout these coming weeks, we're going to start building these little pieces out to show how we can get closer and closer to this application network. Now, Anypoint Platform, the web application, is available from anypoint.mulesoft.com. It's on-prem as part of the Anypoint Platform on-premise edition. So you do have the ability to take this stack and install it on-premise if you have a total requirement to do so. The core functionality in the web application has a bunch of different features, and we'll see more of these as we go through. But at a high level, looking towards the right, we've got the API Manager for managing APIs that have been deployed, applying policies, the Runtime Manager for managing the servers themselves and the apps that get deployed, the Exchange for discovering various components, Access Management, sort of a core services where you can do different things like federated identity and so on against the platform. We have Data Gateway, MQ, Partner Manager, all things you can go to our docs and check out further inside of the MuleSoft documentation. So now let's take a look at walkthrough 1.3, where we're going to explore the Anypoint platform. And in exploring Anypoint platform, we're going to take a look at some of the key areas we described and just get an idea of what some of these different components are. Let's get started. First, we're going to explore Anypoint platform. Let's log in by heading to anypoint.mulesoft.com. You're going to sign up with the same credentials you used when you first set up your account for this class. So go ahead and take a moment to log in using those credentials. You may want to pause the video now and take some time just exploring the areas that are accessible to you. For example, scan through the API Manager, the Runtime Manager, Exchange, and Access Management to see what features are available. Once you've gotten some time to explore on your own, let's come back and join up in the API Manager section of the platform. In API Manager, we have the ability to view our available APIs that we're managing. In this case, we don't have any. So let's go ahead and add a new API. When we click Add New API, we're going to specify some metadata about the API. So this API is going to be called the American Flights API. Its version will be 1.0. The endpoint would specify if there's already an endpoint for this API out there. In this case, we don't have one, so let's leave it blank. And then let's put a description in here. So API for American Flights Table in Training Database. Once you've got these criteria in, let's hit Add. Now we're inside of the API management area for American Flights API. And we can see some different information about this API as we go and build it out. Now, the 3 sections are quite key. In fact, they're almost in order intentionally. The API definition on the left is where we're going to be able to design our API. The portal, as mentioned earlier, is where we're going to be able to expose it and let developers discover it. And then status will be when we actually link up to our API in a running app. We can manage things like policies. So let's start off and head to the API administration link in the main menu, where we can see our API listed. So to do that, we can just go back to API Manager. And now we can see the American API showing up inside of here. If we click 1.0 again, it'll bring us right back here. Now, this little tour has provided us a little bit of context around Anypoint Platform in the API administration area. We're going to dive more into these sections very soon, so stay tuned in the next module.